Have you ever seen a weapon so powerful that the country using it believed it could change the balance of power overnight, only for that same weapon to create a completely unexpected problem? That's exactly what many analysts say happened with one of Iran's most closely watched military strategies. For years, Iran invested enormous resources into building what supporters called a powerful deterrent. It was supposed to keep enemies at a distance, increase Iran's influence across the region, and demonstrate that Tehran could respond to pressure from almost anywhere. But then, something happened. A series of events began raising difficult questions. Questions about effectiveness, questions about cost, and questions about whether a strategy designed to strengthen Iran may have actually exposed some of its biggest vulnerabilities. Tonight, we're breaking down what happened, why experts are paying attention, and how Iran's so-called secret weapon may have produced consequences nobody expected. Because the story isn't just about missiles, drones, or military technology, it's about a gamble. A gamble that may have changed the region in ways Iran never intended, and the consequences are still unfolding. To understand what happened, we need to go back several years. Unlike some major military powers, Iran has faced decades of sanctions, restrictions, and international pressure. Building a conventional military force on the same scale as countries like the United States was never realistic. So Iranian planners looked for alternatives. Instead of focusing entirely on expensive fighter jets, aircraft carriers, or massive overseas bases, Iran invested in something different, something cheaper, something harder to stop, something capable of creating pressure from multiple directions at the same time. That strategy revolved around a combination of missile technology, drone development, and regional influence networks. Over time, these tools became central to Iran's national security doctrine. Supporters viewed them as force multipliers. Critics saw them as risky assets. But there was no denying one thing. The strategy got attention, and for years it appeared to be working. Iran demonstrated increasingly sophisticated missiles. Its drone programs attracted global headlines. Military analysts began publishing reports examining the growing capabilities of Iranian technology. Suddenly, countries around the world were paying attention. Iran had found a way to project power without matching its rivals tank for tank or jet for jet. At least, that was the theory. Because beneath the headlines, there was a challenge that many people overlooked. A strategy can look powerful during demonstrations. It can look powerful during speeches. It can even look powerful in carefully controlled situations. But the real test comes when pressure increases, and that's when things became more complicated. As tensions across the Middle East intensified, Iran's strategic tools faced greater scrutiny than ever before. Every launch, every operation, every response. Everything was being watched. Governments were analyzing outcomes. Military planners were collecting data. Intelligence agencies were studying patterns. And gradually, a picture began to emerge. The very systems designed to provide strategic advantages were also revealing important information to Iran's adversaries. Think about it this way. Every time a new capability is used, observers learn something. They learn about range, accuracy, response times, deployment methods, communication structures, weaknesses, strengths, and perhaps most importantly, they learn how to prepare. This created an unexpected dynamic. The more visible Iran's capabilities became, the more opportunities opponents had to study them. What was once uncertain became measurable, what was once mysterious became familiar, and what was once considered unpredictable became increasingly understood. For military strategists, that's a serious concern, because uncertainty can be a powerful form of deterrence. Once uncertainty disappears, calculations change, and that's exactly what appeared to happen. Then came another problem: cost. When people hear terms like drones or missiles, they often imagine relatively inexpensive systems compared to traditional military equipment. And in some cases, that's true. But maintaining a large-scale strategic capability requires far more than simply producing hardware. There are training programs, research facilities, manufacturing infrastructure, logistics networks, personnel, security systems, maintenance requirements, and continuous upgrades. All of these demand resources. A lot of resources. Over time, questions began emerging about sustainability. Could the benefits justify the investment? Would the long-term costs outweigh the strategic gains? Different experts reached different conclusions, but the debate itself became significant. Because once policymakers begin discussing costs versus outcomes, assumptions start changing. And when assumptions change, strategies often change as well. Then came a development that surprised many observers. Advances in defensive technologies. For decades, offensive systems often received the most attention. Missiles got faster, drones became more sophisticated, ranges increased, capabilities expanded. But defense didn't stand still, not even close. Countries throughout the region and beyond invested heavily in detection systems, tracking systems, interception technologies, artificial intelligence, integrated defense networks. The result? Threats that once appeared extremely difficult to counter became easier to identify, easier to track, and in some cases, easier to stop. Now, this doesn't mean offensive systems suddenly became useless, far from it, but it did mean the balance was changing, and whenever the balance changes, military planners have to adapt. That's where Iran faced a difficult challenge. The very capabilities that once generated strategic advantages were encountering stronger and stronger countermeasures. Every new defense system reduced uncertainty. Every technological breakthrough altered calculations. Every successful interception created new questions, and those questions were becoming harder to ignore. But perhaps the biggest surprise wasn't technological at all. It was political, because military strategies don't exist in isolation. They affect diplomacy, economics, public opinion, regional relationships, international perceptions. Everything is connected. As Iran's capabilities became more visible, reactions intensified. Some countries pushed for stronger cooperation against perceived threats. Others increased defense spending. Regional partnerships evolved. New security arrangements emerged. And suddenly, Iran found itself facing not just individual opponents, but increasingly coordinated responses. This is one of history's oldest strategic lessons. Sometimes strength attracts counter-strength. The more influence one actor gains, the more incentive others have to balance against it. And when multiple countries begin coordinating their efforts, the strategic environment can change dramatically. That's exactly what many analysts believe happened. Actions intended to increase leverage may have unintentionally encouraged greater cooperation among rivals. If true, that's a major problem, because the goal was deterrence, not consolidation of opposition. Yet in some respects, the opposite may have occurred. Then came the moment that really captured international attention. A series of highly publicized military exchanges. Suddenly, the world wasn't discussing theories anymore. It was watching real events unfold in real time. News channels provided continuous coverage. Experts appeared on television. Social media exploded with analysis. Everyone wanted answers. How effective were the systems? What had worked? What hadn't? What lessons would be learned? The results sparked intense debate. Supporters pointed to capabilities that demonstrated reach and operational complexity. Critics focused on limitations, interceptions, and unintended consequences. Both sides claimed validation. But one thing became clear. The narrative was changing. Instead of asking how powerful Iran's strategic tools had become, many observers started asking a different question. Were these tools producing the outcomes they were designed to achieve? And that's a much harder question to answer. Because success isn't measured only by launches, or headlines, or demonstrations. Success is measured by strategic results. And strategic results are often far more complicated than they first appear. By this point, something remarkable had happened. What began as a discussion about military capability evolved into a discussion about strategic effectiveness. That's a completely different conversation. A capability can be impressive. A capability can be advanced. A capability can even be feared. But if it generates costs that outweigh benefits, creates new vulnerabilities, encourages stronger opposition, or produces unexpected consequences, then policymakers have to reevaluate. And that appears to be exactly where the debate now stands, not just inside Iran, but among analysts around the world. The question is no longer whether Iran developed significant strategic tools. The answer to that is obvious. The real question is whether those tools delivered the advantages decision-makers expected, or whether they ultimately revealed limitations that were hidden beneath years of headlines. And the answer may determine the future direction of Iran's security strategy. At first, many people believed Iran had fundamentally changed the military equation in the Middle East. Its expanding missile arsenal and rapidly improving drone technology appeared to give Tehran a powerful advantage. Military experts warned that any future conflict would be unlike anything the region had seen before. But there was one problem. Every major military breakthrough creates an equally determined effort to defeat it. History has shown this again and again. When tanks first appeared, nations developed anti-tank weapons. When stealth aircraft entered service, radar technology evolved. When drones became a major battlefield tool, countries around the world raced to develop new ways to detect and destroy them. Iran's systems were no exception. Instead of accepting a permanent disadvantage, rival countries began investing billions of dollars into countermeasures. New radar networks were deployed. Artificial intelligence was integrated into air defense systems. Satellite surveillance improved dramatically. Electronic warfare capabilities expanded, and intelligence sharing between allied nations became faster than ever before. Slowly, something remarkable happened. Systems that once appeared unpredictable became increasingly familiar. Military planners started recognizing launch patterns. Engineers studied flight paths. Defense analysts compared operational data from multiple incidents. Each real-world event became another source of valuable information. In other words, Iran wasn't just demonstrating its capabilities. It was also giving its rivals an opportunity to study them in extraordinary detail. That may have been one of the biggest unintended consequences of all. Then came another challenge that receives far less attention than missiles or drones: the intelligence war. Modern conflicts are no longer fought only with weapons. They're fought with information. Every communication signal, every satellite image, every intercepted transmission, every online video, every piece of publicly available footage can reveal important clues. Military analysts often call this building the intelligence picture. And once enough pieces come together, even highly secretive operations become easier to understand. This meant Iran faced an increasingly difficult task. Protecting weapons was no longer enough. Protecting information became just as important. Because if an opponent understands how a system operates, how it's transported, how it's launched, how commanders communicate, or where critical facilities are located, that knowledge alone can reduce the effectiveness of even the most advanced weapons. This is why intelligence agencies have become some of the most powerful players in modern security. Sometimes, knowing where a weapon is can matter more than the weapon itself. Meanwhile, the economic pressure continued to grow. Military programs require enormous long-term investment: research laboratories, engineers, factories, raw materials, testing facilities, security infrastructure, transportation networks, training programs, and constant technological upgrades. None of these are cheap. For any country, balancing defense spending with economic needs is a difficult challenge. Governments must constantly decide where limited resources should go: healthcare, education, infrastructure, energy, or defense. These are never easy decisions. Supporters argue that national security must always come first. Critics argue that economic stability is also part of national security. Both perspectives have supporters. But one thing is certain: the larger a military program becomes, the greater the financial burden required to sustain it. That reality affects every country, regardless of size or political system. Another unexpected consequence began emerging on the diplomatic front. As regional tensions increased, countries that had previously disagreed on many issues suddenly found themselves sharing common security concerns. That led to greater military cooperation, more intelligence sharing, joint exercises, technology partnerships, and coordinated planning. Ironically, a strategy designed to discourage cooperation among rivals may have encouraged more of it instead. Military historians have seen similar patterns before. Whenever one country dramatically expands a particular capability, others often respond by strengthening partnerships rather than acting alone. This creates a cycle. One side builds more weapons. The other side builds stronger alliances. Those alliances encourage further military investment, which then encourages even more cooperation. The cycle repeats. Breaking that cycle becomes extremely difficult, especially when trust between governments is already low. Perhaps the most important lesson wasn't about drones or missiles or military hardware. It was about expectations. Weapons can influence events, but they rarely solve political problems by themselves. A missile can reach a target. It cannot negotiate peace. A drone can gather intelligence. It cannot rebuild trust. Military power can shape choices. But lasting security usually depends on diplomacy, economics, regional stability, and political decisions, as much as battlefield technology. That is why so many analysts today argue that modern conflicts cannot be understood by looking only at weapons. The bigger picture matters. Every launch creates political reactions. Every military action creates diplomatic consequences. Every strategic decision influences future alliances. And every response changes the calculations for the next crisis. By now, Iran's so-called secret weapon was no longer being judged only by its technical performance. It was being judged by something much bigger. Did it actually improve Iran's long-term strategic position? Or did it unintentionally create new challenges that are even harder to overcome? That debate continues today, and the answer may shape the future of the Middle East for years to come. So, was Iran's strategy actually a failure? Not exactly, and that's what makes this story so fascinating. Many military analysts agree that Iran successfully developed capabilities that changed how regional security is viewed. Its missile force, drone programs, and asymmetric military strategy forced rivals to take those threats seriously. In that sense, Iran achieved one important objective. It made itself much harder to ignore. But creating a capability and achieving a long-term strategic advantage are not always the same thing. History is filled with examples of powerful weapons that produced unexpected consequences. Some encouraged arms races, others accelerated new technologies, some strengthened alliances among rivals, and a few even forced countries to completely rethink their military doctrines. Iran's strategy appears to have done several of those things at once. Instead of creating permanent uncertainty, it motivated opponents to adapt faster. Instead of discouraging investment in defense, it encouraged it. Instead of freezing the strategic balance, it triggered a new phase of military competition across the region. That doesn't necessarily mean Iran lost, but it does mean the strategic environment became far more complicated than many expected. Another major lesson involves technology itself. Modern warfare evolves at incredible speed. A system that seems revolutionary today may face effective countermeasures only a few years later. Artificial intelligence is improving target detection. Satellite imagery is becoming more detailed. Electronic warfare continues advancing. Cyber capabilities are expanding. Air defense systems are becoming smarter. Drone interception technologies are improving every year. This creates an endless cycle. One side develops a new weapon, the other develops a defense. Then comes another weapon, then another defense. The competition never truly ends. Iran is part of that cycle, just like every other military power. Its future success will likely depend not only on creating new systems, but also on adapting faster than its competitors. Because in modern warfare, standing still is often the fastest way to fall behind. There's also a human side to this story that often gets overlooked. Behind every headline, behind every missile launch, behind every military briefing, are millions of ordinary people, families, workers, students, business owners, communities trying to build normal lives while regional tensions continue. Whenever military competition increases, uncertainty grows, markets react, investment slows, travel becomes more difficult, insurance costs rise, governments redirect resources, even countries not directly involved can feel the economic effects. This is why geopolitical events matter far beyond the battlefield. Their consequences rarely stop at national borders. So where does Iran go from here? No one can answer that with certainty. Iran will almost certainly continue investing in military technology. Its rivals will continue improving their defenses. Regional partnerships will keep evolving. New technologies will reshape future strategies. And intelligence operations will become even more important than before. But one thing seems increasingly clear. The era when any single military capability could dramatically shift the balance of power on its own may be coming to an end. Today's security environment is simply too interconnected. Military strength, economic resilience, technological innovation, cyber capabilities, diplomacy, intelligence, and international partnerships all influence one another. Ignoring any one of those factors creates new vulnerabilities. That may be the biggest lesson of this entire story. So, did Iran's secret weapon really backfire? The answer depends on who you ask. Supporters argue that it successfully deterred adversaries and demonstrated Iran's ability to project power despite decades of sanctions and international pressure. Critics argue that it exposed operational patterns, accelerated defensive innovation, strengthened rival alliances, and increased long-term strategic pressure. Both perspectives contain elements of truth, because strategy is rarely black and white. Success and failure often exist at the same time. A weapon can achieve tactical goals while creating strategic problems. A short-term victory can produce long-term costs. And a decision that looks brilliant today may appear very different years later. That's why military history is never just about weapons. It's about consequences, expected and unexpected. As the Middle East enters another period of rapid change, one question remains unanswered. Will the next breakthrough belong to offensive technology, or to the defenses designed to stop it? Will drones become even more powerful, or will artificial intelligence make them easier to defeat? Will military competition continue accelerating, or will diplomacy finally slow the cycle? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain. The race is far from over, and every new development will reshape the future of the region once again.